Hello, everyone, and welcome to CCTV. I am CCTV's Nick. I'm back after a 2-week hiatus after a wonderful vacation. Thank you to my co-hosts, guests, whatever we want to call them today, Ryan Andersons. I just got to spend the past week at his lake house up in New York. It was a fantastic time. Ryan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
Hey, I'm Ryan Andersons. I'm a stand-up comedian and nerd, and I think way too much about comic books and castings, and that's entirely why I'm here today, is to talk about James Gunn's new DCU and who we think should be a part of it.
Yes.
We have there's been a whole lot of announcements recently. Like, I don't know if you saw the latest one about Metamorpho.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm forgetting the name of the actor, but the guy they got to play him is awesome. And the one I'm most excited for is Nathan Fillion got announced as Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, which is just like perfect casting. He's going to ham it up in that role so well.
Yeah, I want to see what kind of guy Nate is going to be playing. Like, is it going to be somewhat serious Guy Gardner, or is it going to be I want to punch out Batman Guy Gardner, or like there's a lot of different levels they could put him at.
I think I'm expecting a little bit more of the like I want to punch out Batman. I've got a chip on my shoulder, that kind of guy who's a very fun character and very much within Nathan's wheelhouse. I think that's going to be fantastic. A whole bunch of new announcements came out for it, and it's really an exciting time to be a fan of DC movies. James Gunn has done incredible things. If you just saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he got to end that saga on like the best note possible, kind of gave it like the perfect ending for all of his characters. And, I love Marvel. I love my DC, but I know that there's got to be some execs at Marvel that are kicking themselves for the fact that they pretty much lost this guy due to a stupid firing. But one person's misfortune is another person's fortune. And so now James Gunn is in the director's, or I guess, what would you call it, producer's chair?
Yeah, I mean, he's in the Kevin Feige seat, so whatever
creative
you want to call
director
that.
chair.
Yeah.
For the whole DC swath of characters. And honestly, I don't think that they could have gotten a better guy for this, especially with what the DCU needs to be. And we just got done with the DCEU, which was something.
Yeah, I still haven't seen The Flash. I'll admit.
Either.
So, if anybody has comments on that, that's well and justified. I guess I'm waiting for it to come to Max at this point, just because, like, I don't even know any theater around me that's showing it at a convenient time right now. Yeah,
true. And I've heard some people have told me that it's good and yada, yada, yada. And they tried to sort of lighten the tone with the characters, but then it's still like kind of a grimdark story. And that's kind of the theme of what the DCEU was under Zack Snyder. It was very grimdark. All of the characters were very highly self-serious. Kind of like everyone had to be Batman, and
it's because
it doesn't really work.
I think whoever the producers behind it were just like, we saw what you did with Watchmen. Now do it with everybody.
Yeah. Exactly. Give us some very stylized films that are very serious in tone. And I do think that some of that was also coming off of the Dark Knight success. We had 3 fantastic films from Christopher Nolan. He put together this really kind of realistic envisionment of Batman. It was awesome, but that doesn't really fit for every character. Yeah. So first, before we jump into sort of our fan castings for what we want to see from this new DC universe, sort of creatively led by James Gunn, I want to talk a little bit about like what we want to see out of just the tone, our expectations of what the DCU should be. And I think we've kind of touched on this already, but like a lighter tone for lighter characters is sort of essential. Superman shouldn't be just like brooding, and his story shouldn't be joyless and like have all of the life taken out of it.
Yeah, he shouldn't have his dad die when his dad lives into his very old age. Well, Pa Kent anyway, in the comics
Yes.
and in all the other movies. Like,
Oh my
you
gosh.
don't kill him in the first 5 minutes to save the dog.
And the worst, like, he could have been saved. The part that killed me about it was Clark Kent basically let his dad die because his dad was like, no, you can't reveal that you have powers. But in what universe does the superhero let his dad die just because he needs to preserve his identity? Especially like a character who's going to move away to Metropolis anyway and like kind of restart his life. Like, that could have been a good jumping off point to do that. Like, oh crap, people in Smallville have realized that there's something going on with me, or maybe they suspect me. I'm going to leave and go somewhere else. But instead, he just lets his dad die, which is so not the character. That's not what Superman would do.
No, that was the moment that I'm like, all right, I'm done with this movie. And I sat in it in the theater for another like 20 minutes or so. And then I was like, I'm really done with this. Like, Henry Cavill is a great actor, and that was just a terrible decision for Clark Kent. Like, if this was an Elseworld story, if this wasn't trying to be like the Superman story for the DCEU, like that'd be an interesting Elseworlds. Like, how jaded can we make Clark Kent? But it's not. That's not. Yeah. And then they killed.
Do like Injustice, then sure. Yeah. But
and then they killed Jimmy in the first 2 minutes of like.
And he wasn't even really Jimmy. He was like a completely different character. It was like, why even bother calling this guy Jimmy Olsen? He could have been anybody. This is not the character. And I think that's kind of some of the issue too, is that like a lot of these characters just didn't even feel like their characters. They were like kind of mashed into this like, hey, we can't have this because we feel like maybe this is a little too campy. So we want to have nods to the old canon, but at the same time, it really has to fit this hyper realistic vision. So we're just going to call things other than what they really are. And it didn't make sense.
Yeah, which is going back to what James Gunn is doing with the DCU. Like, he's clearly pulling a lot from Grant Morrison's storylines overall, like his Superman story, his Batman stories, like, and the thing about those stories is Morrison embraced the camp and then made it interesting, made it like real and sometimes very creepy.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. And with some of these characters, like their concepts are so campy that you have to lean into the camp a little bit. And there's ways to do that that's still very fun and very entertaining. But I also think like with these characters, we need to see a lot of like humanity, vulnerability, and relatability from them. Because I don't know about you, but when I was watching Marvel movies, like I could see parts of myself in them. I could see like their problems felt relatable. They felt human and grounded. And then I watched the DC movies and it all just felt alien to me. Like all of it just felt so far removed from reality. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that like the scripts weren't necessarily as great and the direction wasn't necessarily as great for some of these characters. This could be solved by having better dialogue, better narrative structure, better pacing. I think if they implemented some of these ideas, then maybe they could make a much better universe full of living characters that feel like who they're supposed to be.
Yeah, like out of the more recent run of the DCEU, like the only one that actually landed for me was the Wonder Woman, the very first Wonder Woman movie. Like that felt right. Like that had some interesting twists. Patty Jenkins really understood the character and her motivation and made Steve Trevor like a good damsel. Like it was all really well done. And then the second one, Patty Jenkins wasn't involved in like at all, I guess. And
oh really? I thought she was still the director.
She got fired from it like early on, like they pitched the story or something, and then she got fired, and it went to somebody else.
Some things.
And it shows like
problematic body control stuff. Like, I don't want to go down that because we'll end up on a rabbit hole that is very different from the conversation we're going to have tonight. But that movie was not good for a variety of reasons. And hey, if you want to know, I would just look at it at Google. Do not watch that movie. It sucks.
Yeah. But that was all just to say that understanding where the characters are coming from and what their actual origins are in the print is what this new DCU seems to be embracing, and that Marvel is finally coming around to also embracing. Quick side tangent with Wolverine and the yellow being leaked.
I did. I saw that. And you know what? It's very yellow, but it is like ripped right out of the comics. Like that looks like that yellow suit, particularly like the updated version. You know, not the classic with the tighty whities. It looks good. It does.
So just because you're embracing camp doesn't mean that it's going to look bad necessarily. If it becomes believable if you treat it seriously, but embrace the camp. And yeah, that. Go ahead.
No, it's good. Another thing I think that they need to do is take the time to introduce these characters, particularly the ones like I think it's awesome that they're going to have cameos in the first Superman movie with like Guy Gardner's Green Lantern and was it Hawkman or Hawkgirl, which is a good call, by the way. Of the two, if you're going to do Hawkman or Hawkgirl, do Hawkgirl. She's way better and way more interesting. And Mr. Terrific, like awesome that they're going to introduce them. But when it comes to like before you have the big crossover movies, like before you have the Justice League per se, right? Show us those characters. Like kind of, I'm not going to say copy Marvel, but what Marvel did was give these characters that were going to be central to like their Avengers movie. They gave them, almost all of them, their own movies first. Unfortunately, Black Widow and Hawkeye did not get those, but you understand what I'm saying. There was time for the audiences to get used to these characters, and there was a build and there was growth. And then we got an Avengers movie after like we knew all of these different portrayals. We had seen them in their own movies. We kind of knew what we were getting, and then we got to see those dynamics that we'd been introduced to, like unfold before our eyes in a crossover film. I think that that's a smart way to do it, rather than just trying to jam as much in and try to catch up to Marvel and try to make it seem like you have a cinematic universe when you really don't.
Yeah, they should. That's one thing that the X-Men movies did pretty well was they snuck little cameos in. Like they built the world by having the Easter eggs of like the Cerebro files, and you could see names that you recognized and some images and whatever. Like laid the groundwork that it's a bigger place with other weird things going on, instead of just having Flash run in and punch somebody for a scene and then run out or whatever.
Yeah, or the emails like in what was it, Batman versus Superman? We're going to introduce the new Justice League via, here are some email messages with video clips where we're going to show you them briefly. Like, that's not character development.
Yeah.
That doesn't really even it works as like maybe a teaser, right? But you can't put teasers into your movie and think that you've done your groundwork for laying the foundations for these characters. That was just like such a misguided decision. And I know why they did it. They did it because they were just trying to play catch up. Yeah. They knew they were behind. Marvel already had a universe going, and they're like, how can we get these things in as fast as possible? And the answer is, you shouldn't, because it's not a good way to tell a story. You should let the story take the time that it needs to develop and breathe. And I feel like they've got the right guy behind the creative vision now, behind the steering wheel, to actually do this the right way.
Indeed. So what do you say we start getting into some of our castings for like some of these announced projects that we know James Gunn already talked about, that they're in the works, but we don't know who's behind them yet?
Yep. I think that's a smart idea, especially because there's so many characters. And I think, we're going to start off by going through our fan castings for the announced projects. And just a little disclaimer, there are various different reasons why we chose these people. Some of these we chose based on the reality of the situation, like whether we think they'll actually be practical picks that they could actually get cast in the role. And some of these, like it's a fan casting, sometimes we just went with like our own ideal, like who would be good, even if it doesn't seem all that realistic. And we'll tell you when with each one, we'll kind of explain our own justification. I think as we go from each character, like if you don't mind, Ryan, I'll start with the first one, and then you can go second, and then we'll switch, and then for the next character, you say yours first, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So for our first announced project, we're going to go with Lanterns. Lanterns is following the Green Lantern Corps, particularly Green Lantern's Hal Jordan and John Stewart. It is announced as a TV project. And so with that in mind, for the first character, I'm going to fan cast the first character being Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. For this one, I feel of all of my picks, this one might be my strongest in terms of rationale. For this one, I'm going with Jensen Ackles. Now, Jensen Ackles, you might know him from Supernatural. If you do know him from Supernatural, what you know is that he already has a breadth of experience co-starring in a show that's all about solving supernatural sort of detective investigation type crimes, right? So this guy, he's already he's co-led, so he knows how to share the scene. He has done like kind of supernatural detective work. On top of that, if you've listened to his voice, particularly in The Boys as Soldier Boy, hearing his like kind of deep voice and his like grittiness and roughness sounds like in my head what Hal Jordan should sound like. He seems like this guy who's like he feels a little bit like he's from another era. He's more into like his own machismo, maybe a little bit of bravado, but I think that he could really nail this role. He looks the part, which isn't everything, but it helps for sure. He's done superhero stuff before, so he's familiar with that world, and he's done TV before, and that is important because when you have an actor in a TV series, you want somebody who's used to the schedule of serial fiction. It's a different world than movies. Jensen Ackles is very much acclimated to that, and this is also a realistic casting choice for me because since Jensen Ackles is willing to take TV roles, I think he'd be much more likely to accept this role than, say, if I were to say, like, Chris Pine. Chris Pine is a movie star that's, he knows his pedigree and he knows where he can go. And so I think that Jensen Ackles could be a safe bet in terms of doing this role, and I also think he'd be amazing at it.
That's fair. And I don't think Jensen Ackles is a bad choice. One note I would say about the voice, like when he's doing the Dean voice or the Soldier Boy voice, like I don't hear that when I read Hal. Like I could hear him in his normal register, and I think that'd be fine. But that's just me. For me, I went with Ben O'Toole, who is like not as broadly known as Jensen Ackles, but he's in this movie called Bloody Hell, where he plays this dude who escaped, like got out of prison only to get like captured by serial killers, essentially. And he's going slightly insane, or more than slightly insane, in order to sort his way out of that situation. And he has some really impressive acting chops. And but when he was in his like serious, like got to get this done mode, I could see Hal in him, and he has a very similar build to how Hal is in the comics. And I just thought James Gunn likes to go with people who started in horror movies, it seems, because that's also his pedigree, because he worked in what is it, Trauma? Yeah, Trauma. So like that seemed to be some connective tissue I noticed in some of his recent picks of people he's casting. So I was like, okay, this guy might actually be on his radar, and I think he'd be an interesting pick. So that's my Hal Jordan.
Sweet. Yeah, and I think like even if they're not as well known, like that's not necessarily a score against them. If anything, I think that might be a score in their favor because hate to say it, but if they're not as well known, they're not as well established, they're a little cheaper to get. And if they're a fine, fabulous actor, then like who really cares, right? You can make someone a star. Like star power is great because it brings people to the box office, but for a TV show, people are going to come and watch it just based on the characters alone. So I think that's a good choice.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
Moving on to Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart is I would think Hal is going to be kind of the more wild card, and Jon Stewart's going to be more the straight laced of the pair. So I went with Lakeith Stanfield from Sorry to Bother You and a whole bunch of other projects. But he's a dude that emits a gravitas to him, and he can play a cop. He's done it before in some other roles, and Space Cop isn't that different from this cop. And he looks like he has that kind of built-in authority to him that I think Jon Stewart has when I think of Jon Stewart. So that's why I picked him for this.
Yeah, I think that's it. I like him I think it's a good pick. I will say my pick for Jon Stewart Green Lantern is much more of a gamble. Now, I'll tell you who it is first. It's Mahershala Ali. And I know what you're thinking. He's already been cast as Blade. But if you've been paying attention to what's been going on, he was announced as Blade 3 or something years ago. It was a long time ago. It was at a convention. They had him come out. They're like, look, here's our new Blade, a fantastic actor that people love because he's amazing. And everything he's done, he's been amazing. I think about Moonlight, how good he was in that. I think about Cottonmouth when he played Cottonmouth in Luke Cage. Incredible actor. And he's been shown that he can do a variety of different roles. The reason why I would cast him as Jon Stewart is because it has been reported that he has expressed his discontent at how long it has taken for them to start, because Blade is still in pre-production. They haven't even started shooting Blade yet.
They keep fucking up the script, apparently.
Yeah, and so I think that it would not be that difficult if you could say, hey, look, here's money and a regular schedule. Now with the whole actors strike, I mean, this kind of throws all of our stuff out of whack, but still, considering the variables, considering that you have an incredible actor who is not happy right now, I imagine it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to pull him in. And he is such a good actor. I imagine, if you kind of like what you were saying, Ryan, you've got a buddy cop thing going on. If you had Hal Jordan, he's more of kind of the more reckless of the two, right? And then Jon Stewart's got to be the more grounded, the heavy, right? Mahershala Ali could do that so well.
Yeah.
He could pull off that dynamic incredibly. Granted, he's so versatile that he could probably pull off whatever dynamic you needed him for. But just an all-around amazing actor who has shown that he is willing to do TV shows as well.
Yeah, I mean, he was on True Detective also, which,
yes,
so he has the cop chops.
He knows how to play the cop. He's done it before.
All right, let's move on because we got a lot of people.
We have a lot of them. Yep. Next up, we'll go with Supergirl. And Supergirl, for this, we're going with the Kara Zor-El character. Now, it hasn't been confirmed that that's the Supergirl they're going to go with.
Well, they did say it's going to be based on the Woman of Tomorrow storyline by, God, I can't remember the person's name. But it's Supergirl being like a warrior woman. I don't know who's calling, but
someone's watching the stream and they're like, no, I know who should be Jon Stewart. I'm going to tell Ryan right now.
They're like, you talked about Mahershala taking on the Jon Stewart role. We have to stop you.
True. Well, my idea for Supergirl is, look, Supergirl has the same origin as Superman. You can take that in a variety of different ways. You can do a lot of interpretations of the character. But for Supergirl, I think she's got to be likable. She's got to be personable. She's got to have a range of character. She's got to be able to portray some form of optimism. And for that, I'm going with Zendaya. Now, Zendaya she was MJ in the most recent Spider-Man movies, but those are they've come to a close a bit, and it's up in the air as to whether or not they're going to do another Spider-Man, if she'd be in there or not. And she's really a supporting character in that, but she is so much more than that. She is an incredible actress. She is like a rising star. You need somebody youthful, but somebody who's also seasoned and can portray something beyond their own years. I think she would be great. I think she'd bring in a massive fandom to the project. That's my pick. Ryan, I'm going to kick it over to you. Otherwise, we'll be here all day.
Yeah. I went with another kind of unknown, not well-known person, Thomasin McKenzie from Last Night in Soho, which is an Edgar Wright film. And she just, more than anything, she displays like this range of she can do the very sensitive and emotional, which is Korda Kara, and then she can also do just warrior. So I was like, yeah, so these are two sides that we really need in this, especially if they're going based off the comic book storyline. So I thought she fit the mold for that. And yeah, that's really as much thought as I put into it. I put way too much thought into all these, honestly.
And some of them were very difficult.
Yeah.
I had some difficulty with Supergirl. I will admit that. We'll let you know some of the ones that we thought were challenges when we get to them. But moving right along.
Right along. The next one, this one was like my first no-brainer. The character is Swamp Thing. And the first name that popped in my mind was Ron Perlman of Hellboy fame and pretty much every good Guillermo del Toro movie fame, which is most of them. And it just, his voice has that gravitas, and like if Swamp Thing speaks, like that's the voice I hear in my head when I read it.
Yes. When you want a humanized monster, you go with Ron Perlman. So for this one, I also happen to agree with Ryan. I had the same pick. The very first name that came into my mind when I was like Swamp Thing, I was like, oh, Ron Perlman. That is the perfect casting for this character. I only added to the list Vincent D'Onofrio, but it's only because he wants it. Like, he got up on the convention stage recently, and they asked him if you did a DC character, who would it be? And he was like, I want Swamp Thing so bad. And I could see him pulling that off too. But I would, I'm not going to lie, I would prefer Ron Perlman. I think that he would give that character so much heart, and that character needs it. And if you're at home and you have not read the Alan Moore run of Swamp Thing, you're doing yourself a disservice. It is one of the best comic books to ever be written. You should read that run. It's so good.
Period. Moving on to the next person.
Gold. Booster Gold. So I love this. I love so much. This is why I have so much faith in James Gunn, because later we're going to talk about characters we'd love to see that are a little bit more obscure and we didn't think they'd get properties. And Booster Gold would have been one of mine because I think he is so great. He has this storyline of this guy who came to the past and he was all about like trying to be a hero. Well, for his own celebrity, he wanted to be famous. So he came from the future where he took a bunch of future tech, goes back in time, tries to be this big guy, and then slowly but surely, after like failing a bunch, he learns how to actually be a responsible and respectable hero. And so I love that James Gunn is doing this character. He absolutely needs to have a property. He could host a movie, a TV show, whatever you put him in, it's going to be great. My perfect pick for him would have been Chris Pratt. However, I do think that's unlikely. They did say Star-Lord is continuing in the MCU. So I'm going to put him off the table. And instead, I'm going to go with Joe Keery, who you may know from Stranger Things as Steve Harrington. Now, Steve Harrington, Joe Keery played this character. He played a character that came in with his own arrogance, his own pomp, his own circumstance. He was all into his own self-glory. But then a bunch of jokes are told at his expense, and he rolls with them so well. And slowly but surely over time, Steve grows into a much more likable, much more responsible character. I think that he could nail this. I think that having the ability to be able to make things funny when you're the butt of the joke is a skill that not a lot of actors have, and I think he has it in spades. I'd love to see him as Booster. Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, for Booster Gold, I went with Ansel Elgort from Baby Driver, who is the titular baby. And in the movie, like, he deals with being called baby the whole time. Like, that's just his name. He has to deal with it and all the jokes that come with it. And that's kind of the same sort of attitude that I would expect Booster to have. Like, what kind of a name is Booster? And then he has to like roll with it. And then yeah, and also he can look really cool, and he can also look really goofy at any time. Like, he has great facial acting. So that's what made him my Booster. Moving on to the next one. This is a big heavy.
Big name character.
Yeah. Lex Luthor, the villain of the Superman series, and has been played by so many great people. But for me, like, I wanted somebody who, like, in the Superman animated series, the Lex Luthor in that was like very baritone and like restrained and stuff. And I kind of want to bring some of that back to Lex Luthor, as opposed to like the madman aspect of him that, like, what's his face who played Mark Zuckerberg?
Oh my gosh, Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah.
Ripped my hair out. Did the worst casting choice of all of the DCEU things. That was the worst.
I grew to appreciate it, but like he was just a little too far left field. So I wanted to go back more to a central and like somebody who's methodical and yeah. So I picked Jordan Peele as Lex Luthor. I was considering Jeffrey Wright also, but he already has been cast, as Gordon in the Matt Reeves Batman. So I was like, people aren't going to buy it. But Jordan Peele can do no wrong. So, and he can be scary. Like,
yes.
if he knows scary, he can be scary. He can be intimidating. So, Jordan Peele.
Yeah, I think Jordan Peele is a good choice. I love it too, because I think it's one of those like outside the box sort of picks that you wouldn't normally associate with, but he absolutely has the skill set to do it. I think there's a universe where we got a really good Lex Luthor performance out of Billy Zane, but I think that time has passed.
Yeah.
For my pick, I went easy mode. I went Giancarlo Esposito.
It's a really good pick, though.
I know. And the thing I hate about this pick is that he gets typecast as the villain, and this would only further cement it by making him Lex Luthor. It's like, this dude is villains only. But at the same time, you're looking for a Lex Luthor. You're looking for a guy who has so much weight, who can carry himself in a scene that he can stare down literal Superman and hold himself together, have so much composure, and turn the table around, faced with a person with the power of essentially a god, right? And I think about Giancarlo Esposito. I think about that scene he had with Homelander, where Homelander comes in hot, and just through his words and his cutting wit, he is able to flip the script and put Homelander in his place. Mm-hmm. This guy knows how to play the villain. He knows how to command presence. And if you're going to be Lex, you have to have that gravitas. Michael Rosenbaum himself, who was, I think, probably the best live-action Lex Luthor we've seen, has asked for that on his own podcast. He said, like, look, if you're going to cast Lex, he was interviewing James Gunn. He was like, make sure Lex has gravitas. And Giancarlo Esposito has that in spades, so he gets my vote.
Yeah, like I just peeked behind the curtain when you wrote that. I immediately was like, that is the best pick. I just love Giancarlo Esposito too. Like, he's so good.
I do too. But he's amazing.
We got to move on though.
Moving right along. So the next one up on our list is Robin, Damian Wayne Robin, because that's the one that they've announced. They're going to go with the Damian Wayne version of the character. He happens to be my favorite pick, but I will also admit that Damian Wayne is hard to cast. because you have to have somebody who is young, but also acts like they are above their age. He has to come off a little arrogant. He has to come off a little snooty. And to do that right as a child actor, it's really hard to pull off. So I cheated a little. I went with somebody who's like 18, 19 years old, still looks youthful, but I think could actually pull off the snark of the character. I went with Aidan Gallagher, who you will know from the Umbrella Academy. He's already, as a young person, had to play a character that is an adult, like in mind, and he's done that very well. And he's very good at his one-liners. He's very quick-witted. He's very quippy, and he seems very serious. And that's another thing about Damian, is that Damian is the son of Batman in both like biologically, but also in terms of mindset. He's also a planner. He's also a thinker. He's thinking 5 steps ahead of his enemies. And you need somebody who can convey that. So that's why I went with him. Brian?
Yeah. Mine was much less thoughtful, honestly. Like Nick said, it's very hard to pick child actors, especially if you don't watch a lot of things that have children in them. So I just looked at Jacob Kim from Nope, and I was like, that kid looks kind of like Damian. All right, good enough.
Sometimes that's the way to go off of it, though. Like, you can't, like, if a character has a certain look, like, you can't deny that look. That's part of the character.
Yeah, and I mean, he's got good bits of Nope too. So like, I'm sure he could do it. But I just had to admit my motivation. Moving on to the next half of the sandwich. So it's
probably the big one. Like, let's be real. This is going to be the big one.
This one kept me up. This one and one a little later on kept me up the longest trying to figure out who this would be. But this is the Batman of the Batman and Robin side. And for my pick, I went with Charlie Hunnam of Sons of Anarchy and Crimson Peak fame and Pacific Rim, like all those movies. And I did it I picked him because he can do Civilized, like he can do the Playboy character, and then he can be absolutely brutal and just rip people apart. So I figured he could do that. You just have to dye his hair black, and he's fine. He's got piercing blue eyes, and he can do an American accent pretty flawlessly. So.
And I think that is a good choice. I mean, I really do. I like that pick. I like it almost as much as my pick. And I'm going to admit, like, for this one, I've seen a bunch of fan castings for this one already. But I didn't go with this for the fan castings. I went with this because in this movie, it's probably going to be like the son of the demon. There's a son of Batman. It's going to be all about like Batman's relationship with his son, Damian, Robin. So you need a Batman that is both like has his own like grittiness to him. He has his own composure, but he also has to then like teach his son and like be a father. Mm-hmm. And who is better than that than Pedro Pascal? Pedro Pascal is the best actor right now at being badass dad. He's so good at it. He's done it in like the 2 biggest properties, The Mandalorian and The Last of Us, that he's currently known for. Now, the big issue with Pedro is that yes, he is a rising star, and it feels like he's very overcommitted. But with The Mandalorian, he has recently switched over to just doing the voice of the character. Voice acting is a lot less demanding on a person's schedule. And, spoiler alert, if you played The Last of Us 2, his character might not... Let's just say that he might have some openings in his schedule, and I'm going to leave it at that. So I think that he could potentially be the Mandalorian in voice and also be Batman coming up very soon. And I think he has the gravitas for the character. I think he has the potential to be the best Batman on screen we've ever seen.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. And just also vouching for my pick of Charlie one more time. He also played a dad, and he could do dad things.
My dad could beat up your dad. This is where we've gone.
All right.
Okay, so that's like, I think that kind of wraps us up on picks of characters for announced projects. Now we're going to move on to popular characters who are very likely to appear, but we don't know, they haven't been confirmed yet, but also it's the DC universe, so these guys kind of have to show up.
Yeah.
And the first one we're going to start things off with is The Flash. Now, I know that we have seen The Flash has been cast, and he's Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller has a variety of issues. We're not going to go into those. You can go online, you can look them up. I think that The Flash should probably be recast. I also think, we've been on this recent kick of Barry Allen, but Barry Allen used to be a very wooden character. So for this pick, I want to go with a much more humanized Flash, and I think that the better choice to go with is the Wally West character.
100%.
I think that they could do and they could do such an interesting movie that's never been done before, where you start with the character who was the sidekick, and now he is the character, and you can do retrospective flashbacks throughout the movie about the lessons that he learned from the guy who was the Flash before him, who has passed or is gone for a variety of different reasons.
Lost in the time stream, even.
Yeah, you can do the whole thing in Crisis, where he disappears and you don't know exactly. I mean, in Crisis they showed a skeleton, but he went into the Speed Force. Who knows what went on with Barry? And he can show up again later in later movies to help out or whatever. But I think that Wally needs to be the centered grounding focus because he is such a human character. He's an everyman. You get to watch him have his family. You get to watch him have his kids. And so I went with somebody who might be a little bit unorthodox of a pick, but I think that he embodies the everyman. He is very relatable. I would cast Jack Quaid, who you may know from The Boys. He plays Huey. In that show, he is the emotional center. He is the everyman. He's the person who you look through the eyes of this character and you're like, hey, he's kind of normal, but that's okay. I feel that. And I think that he could be an amazing Flash. He also has a slim and slender build if we're going for look, and I think the Flash should be somebody he's a runner, right? And runners burn calories and they end up being slender and slim in their build. And he's also just an amazing actor. Ryan, take it away.
He's also Boimler on Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yes.
So also one of my favorite shows. So I think that's a very solid choice. My choice was for Joseph Quinn, who played Eddie in Stranger Things in the most recent season.
I love your choice too. I love your choice so much too. I love them both.
He has the playfulness. He can do funny. He can do angry. He can do dramatic. And so can Jack Quaid, of course. But it's something about also just his eyes. I could see those behind the red mask very clearly. And if it's not going to be Grant Gustin, which I also want to recast him as Wally. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah. At this point, probably not. But that's my choice.
I feel you. You know what? We could put these two concepts together and get Joseph Quinn as Wally with Jack Quaid as Barry, and have him as the Barry Allen in the Barry scenes, because I think he could do both characters justice. But
that'd be pretty good. Moving on to the next one. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but Aquaman is getting recast. So my pitch is Joe Manganiello, who in the DCEU played Deathstroke, Wade Wilson. And my thought behind this is more that Aquaman, a lighter Aquaman, like the Brave and the Bold Aquaman, like a kind of goofy, but also super strong and super good-hearted. That's Joe Manganiello. He's a big goof who can also be metal, and I'd like to see that kind of Aquaman. So I thought he'd be a good shot.
And I'm going to go ahead and agree with you, Ryan, because my pick for Aquaman is I don't care. And let me rationalize that choice. I don't care because I have never really cared so much about Aquaman. I think that going the route that you say, though, is like, if you can sell me on this sort of like bombastic, like I'm a hero, I'm like kind of like Hercules, like I'm gonna brag about my exploits and everything like that, like a folklore sort of hero, then I can get behind that. But the character just doesn't do it for me. So your choice is fine. If it wasn't for Thor Ragnarok being what it was, being amazing and having him be Thor, I think Chris Hemsworth could also nail that same idea of being this like.
I also thought Liam Hemsworth. Yeah.
Yeah, I that would be fine too. I don't care so much about Aquaman, but I do think Emilia Clarke would be an amazing Mera. And I always loved Mera so much more than Aquaman personally. I think that the Queen has just this like regalness to her, this composure to her, and having somebody who's already kind of done that and then also can maybe do it and have her anger be portrayed in a way that doesn't destroy her character would be fantastic. And it would maybe give some justice to Emilia Clarke, who got shafted, if you've ever watched Game of Thrones. Moving right along, before we get nailed in the comments, to Nightwing. Now, Nightwing was the hardest choice. Hardest choice for me. And
also
for me, I copped out. I copped out and went with an actor that I think would be fantastic at it. He looks the part. He has the acting chops to do it. And I don't think he will ever do it, ever. I went with Timothy Chalamet, T-Shal. I don't think he would do the role because I think he's more likely to wait a few years and try to be Batman more than anything else because he's so used to being the leading man now.
Yeah.
But I do think he would be an incredible Nightwing. And I think if given like the right script and if they were able to be like, no, we're going to make Nightwing a huge member of the DCU, then maybe they could pull him in. Maybe they could get him in there, do some great things with Dick Grayson and make him like a centerpiece. Because Dick Grayson really deserves to be that. That character, like he's led the Justice League. He was the leader of the Teen Titans. He led the Titans. They recently did an arc where he was like the guy who ran the Justice League. He is an incredible character. I hope that they do what they need to with him and they don't just make him a side character. So if they're gonna put him front and center, my vote would be Timothy Chalamet. Ryan?
Yeah. Similarly, I had a lot of trouble with this. I was trying to balance out like how old Batman and Robin are going to be in relation to Nightwing. So I went with somebody a little bit younger. Well, maybe the same age as Timothy Chalamet. I don't know, but I think it's pronounced Aramis Knight. He was the Red Dagger dude from Miss Marvel. He's athletic. He could do the acrobatic portion of it and everything. And like I remember seeing him on Miss Marvel going, that guy could be a Nightwing or at least a circus performer or something. Or Tim Drake even. But we're talking Nightwing, so I settled on that.
I feel you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do the next three. We're gonna do Cyborg, Batgirl, and Wonder Woman. Let's kind of lightning round these three so we can get to like the real juicy ones.
Cool. Am I starting or are you starting?
You go.
All right. I'll just do them all three in a row. Cyborg, I went with Trevor Jackson from Eureka. He was a young autistic kid, but since then has blown up and grown up, and he looks more the part of a like teenage to young 20-something cyborg, I think should be. For Batgirl, I went with Amanda Sternberg from Bodies, which is a very funny horror movie, and she just seemed like she could be like serious Barbara, but also has some comedy to her, and just a different kind of Batgirl than we're used to seeing. And for Wonder Woman, I went with Sophia Barclay from Ted Lasso. Honestly, I just saw somebody that looked kind of like Wonder Woman to me, so that was it.
I feel that. My cyborg choice was John Boyega. I feel like that guy has like he has so much talent, and I think he got robbed and done dirty. At each Star Wars film that went on that he was in, his role got reduced even more and more, which is ridiculous because he's such an incredible talent, and I think that he could own the role of Cyborg. For Batgirl, I went with Chloe Grace Moretz. I'm not going to lie, I was thinking about the Hit Girl days back in Kick-Ass. I think that she has the talent for it. She has shown that she can also even do like the stunt work, and I think that she can do the seriousness, but then I also have seen the humanity from her, especially if you've watched Nimona. She did an incredible job voicing the character. Awesome, can bring breath to a character. I think she'd be fantastic. And for Wonder Woman, I'm going with keeping Gal Gadot. Now, this might sound like a cop-out because Gal Gadot has already been the character, sure. But James Gunn already said that he's okay with keeping some of the old people from the DCEU. And I think she did such a good job embodying Wonder Woman. I think it would be a crime to not give her another movie, especially after what they did to her in Wonder Woman 2. I think that she needs to be kept around. They could do it as a full reboot, but I think honestly it's probably better to do a modern day story of her, even if it is in the DCEU, and even if her original origin story from Wonder Woman doesn't carry over. They could do so much with her as Wonder Woman. I would love to see her kept. And now we move on to probably the most controversial or the most difficult to cast character, we'll say that, and that is the Joker. Because let's be real, if there's going to be a DCU, we're going to get a Joker eventually. It might not be in our first Batman movie, but if it's not in our first, it'll be in our second or third. And for this character, I'm going to go with David Tennant. Now, you probably know him as your favorite Doctor Who. You may also know him from Good Omens. You may know him from Jessica Jones as Purple Man. This guy knows how to play characters that are cutting and calculated, but also insane and chaotic. I can see him right now in my mind. He looks the part of the character, but he could sound and act the part of the character. I think he could deliver us a very, very interesting Joker. And I think he could do pretty much all versions of the Joker. There's the Crown Prince of Crime, who's more of a calculating gangster type. There's the crazy, chaotic psychopath. And I think he could do all of that. I think he could even merge them into one and make this really well-rounded Joker that would be great for a universe. Ryan.
I went with Rami Malek from Mr. Robot because he's like, if you've seen Mr. Robot, it is a super gripping show where he's battling parts of himself throughout, and he's just, he can do creepy, he can do cunning, he can do vicious, he can be brutal. He can sing, which sometimes, Joker sings. I just think he'd bring a very different kind of Joker than we've seen from the likes of Joaquin Phoenix and Heath Ledger and Jared Leto. And I'd really like to see what he can do. And also he can great face contortions all around. So I'd love to see what he could bring to a character.
I also love that casting choice too. I love David Tennant, but I also love him, and he also has done comedy. Like SNL is a hit or miss. Sometimes it's kind of funny. Sometimes, most of the times, it's just more skillful. But his episode of SNL was legitimately funny, and it was all because of him. I mean, great cast. They did their roles too, but he did a really fantastic job.
Indeed. Moving on to the next one, you can't have the Joker without Harley Quinn, especially in this day and age. So
this is true.
We got to have Harley Quinn in the DCU, and in keeping in line with Rami Malek as the Joker, I went with Carly Chaikin as Harley Quinn. And I did that for two reasons. One, because they already have a chemistry of sorts in the show. She played his estranged sister, who he sometimes remembers as his sister, sometimes doesn't. And she's very smart. Wait, now I'm thinking, is this the sister or is this the friend? whichever. She's very smart. She's very manipulative. Could play up the whole psychologist aspect of Harley really well, and she can go vicious and crazy, and I think that'd be fun.
I feel you. For Harley, again, it's gonna sound like a cop out, but I have reasons. I went with keep Margot Robbie, and my reason being, we don't yet know if the Suicide Squad, not the original Suicide Squad movie, but we don't know if the Suicide Squad is going to be considered canon to this universe, because Peacemaker is, and Waller is, and they're all kind of, they stemmed from that. Yeah. And I also just think that she did a really good job with the character. I think that she embodied the humor, the chaos, the whimsicalness. I think she did a fantastic job as a live action one. I don't see the need to recast her. I kind of hope that they keep her. Yeah. I don't know that they will, but I hope they do.
I agree. Next up, I'm going to take this because you agreed with my answer.
I do.
It's Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, however you want to pronounce it. And I would like a definitive pronunciation from James Gunn. That'd be very helpful. But I went with Oded Fehr from so many things, but most notably for me, from Star Trek Discovery, playing Ra's. He's a very wide-ranged actor. And he can be the villain, he can be the philosopher, he can be a general. Like he's very believable in all these roles. He's a mentor, and that you need all those parts to play Ra's al Ghul.
I fully agree with you. I also think the only thing I'm going to add is that so you have a character named either Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul, depending on how you want to pronounce it and depending on what we see on screen. We need to stop having that guy be played by a white dude. Okay.
Yes.
He's
100%.
In his background, he's supposed to be either like Arabic or like somewhat Asian. And like, we don't need to have a white dude play him anymore. I agreed 100% with Ryan. This is the guy that I would cast in the role as well. That's about all I have to say about that. So that kind of rounds out like both who we think should be in these roles for announced projects and then also popular characters who are likely to appear. Now we're going to talk a little bit in our last few minutes. We don't have a ton of time, but about characters who we'd personally like to see. And these are just, we're not going to necessarily cast them. We're just going to say like who we think should be in there and real quick why we think they should be there. Ryan, do you want to go first? You want me to go?
I'll go first because mine are very straightforward. So 3 characters I'd like to see. Clayface from the Batman franchise, because we've never seen him in live action at all. And just a very interesting character that deserves to be in the movie. Zatanna, the magician, because she also deserves to be in movies. She's been featured great on the Young Justice cartoon and in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, but hasn't made live action debut yet, and that's a shame. And my last pick is the Spectre, who's like the god of vengeance of sorts in the DC universe. And that just more ties into that James Gunn is doing, gods and monsters. So we need some more gods maybe, and the Spectre is my go-to character for that.
That is smart. I like that choice too. I like all of your choices. I think that they're great, and I don't think some of them we have not seen portrayed correctly yet. And that would be amazing to get that opportunity. For my picks, my first one off the bat is Green Arrow, and not Arrow, because that was just like Batman shooting a bow. I mean, Green Arrow, you need to lean into the camp, okay? This is a dude who fashioned himself as a superhero, and he's very clearly like parody, like he's a play on Robin Hood, but you need to embrace the camp when you do that. Having a character who's like, he's like, I'm I'm Robin Hood in real life could be very fun. And in the comics, he's quippy, he's witty, he's funny. I would have Carrie Ells play him if not for the fact that he's in his 50s now. But there's a bunch of different people who could pull this off, and I think that you have to like do that movie right and have certain characters call him out and dunk on him a little bit. But at the same time, his desire to help people and be a hero is sincere, and I think that you could have a really fun movie out of that. I also want to see the Red Hood. The Red Hood, now I don't know that we're going to get him if they're starting with Damian Wayne, because then you have to go into the backstory of Jason Todd as a Robin, all that kind of stuff. But I do think that movie, Under the Red Hood, the cartoon, has shown that has so much cinematic potential. The things you could do with that film would be incredible. My last choice, I originally was going to go with Impulse because it's a character that I love and is dear to my heart, but I'm actually going to switch this in the 11th hour to Mr. Freeze. Because I want to see the right Mr. Freeze. I want to see the guy who is so relatable and so tragic in his origins because he's trying to save his wife and it all goes wrong. If you've ever watched Batman the Animated Series, the Mr. Freeze origin that they reimagined for that show and then they went with in the comics later, that is the Mr. Freeze I want to see on screen. I don't want to see Campy Arnold. I want to see a really good, very well done, tragic character, tragic villain arc for Mr. Freeze. I think that would be fantastic.
I 100% agree. If we have time, we just have one last honorable mention. Some obscure characters we think James Gunn could make. Okay.
Just telling us to go nuts. Thank you. Thank you.
These last two are kind of nuts. So these are just obscure characters we think that James Gunn could make work. My pick was originally going to be, and then I realized that he kind of already made mention that this character exists, was Batmite. But he was referenced in Peacemaker, so James Gunn potentially has a plan.
Oh my gosh, please include Batmite. Please include Batmite.
So instead, I went with Lil Lobo, which is like a little clone of Lobo or a young Lobo. And just a very weird choice, and I think he could somehow make that work.
I think so too. Especially because, it's been rumored that we're going to get Lobo and he might be played by Jason Momoa, which is fine because Jason Momoa could basically play himself and he'd be Lobo. That's good casting in my mind. I think Lil Lobo would be a fun addition, especially if he was in that movie or involved some way in that. My pick for obscure characters, you may have to Wikipedia this one because he's not very mainstream at all. His name is Dexstar. Dexstar is a cat who we found out was from Earth originally. We kind of thought he was an alien cat because he looks blue. He is a Red Lantern, which if you don't know all that, read the 2006 on run of Green Lantern, and you will see him in there. He's a Red Lantern. They're all about anger. They channel anger through their rings, and that's their power. He has a really tragic backstory where his owner was killed, and so he seeks to get revenge to punish the people that killed his owner. But he is a cat, right? So he's this angry cat that spews red goo out of his mouth that is very destructive. And I think James Gunn could make this character work very well. He has already shown he's willing to go with wacky, crazy ideas that are out there that people would not expect to see on screen. I would have never thought to see Cosmo, the telekinetic cosmonaut dog, on screen, but he did it, and he did it well. And I would love to see him take on Dexstar. I think that having this cat with you could even do a juxtaposition where Batman's talking about his tragic backstory, and then you have this cat who's also has just as tragic of a backstory as Batman, could be played for some comedy. I think there are good things to do with that character.
Yeah, I honestly, when you had pitched that, I had also thought of Dexstar first, but forgot what his name was. So then I started looking up, and I'm like, oh, Nick already got him. Shit. Well,
Yeah.
I think that'll do it for this episode of CCTV.
Yeah. Did it. We went down the line. We cast many different characters. Most of our choices will probably not be seen, but hey, if we got any, you know what? If Ryan and I got any one right, that would be amazing. Okay, that would be incredible.
Somebody buy us a drink or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or like send us one of those Burger King crowns, and we can like wear it in private. And I'll wear it on stream for a little while.
That'd be good too. But thanks for tuning in. Anybody who has been tuning in, or if you're watching the VOD, let us know what you think, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, and is there anybody that we're rating into? Okay. So we are rating on into Nev. And is Nev playing anything in particular? Okay, Nev is probably playing 7 Days to Die, so you should stay tuned and watch that. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Nick from CCTV signing off. I hope that you go and see these DCU movies, and I hope more than anything that they are lighthearted and wonderful and so good and everything that we deserve as an audience.
We can only hope. See you.
Peace out, everyone. Take care.